para esto. Después vendría una respuesta tuya si hay algún doctor que quiera hacer alguna pregunta. Luego tenemos la deliberación de los jurados por más o menos 20 minutos y cerramos con la lectura del acta y cierre de la sesión. Entonces, primero vamos con la apertura protocolaria. Me voy a permitir presentar nuestro candidato a doctor, Óscar Fernando Abella Peña. El título de su trabajo doctoral es The Co-Construction of School English Language Teachers' Critical Identities Through Narrative Positioning. La trayectoria y profesional de Osquitar lo podemos resumir en que él es licenciado en Educación Básica con énfasis en inglés de la Universidad Distrital Francisco José de Caldas. También es magíster en Educación con énfasis en Didáctica del Inglés de la Universidad Externado de Colombia. Durante su formación en el programa de doctorado interinstitucional en educación de la Universidad Distrital, cursó 81 créditos académicos en los espacios de formación de énfasis en educación y pedagogía y en investigación y obtuvo un promedio acumulado de 4.66. También sustentó y aprobó su proyecto de tesis doctoral titulado The Co-Construction of English Language Teachers' Critical Identities Through the Narrative Positioning con acta de sustentación número 10 del 24 de noviembre de 2025. Realizó su pasantía de investigación doctoral en Transmigrants, Remiendo Teatro Granada del 1 de noviembre al 30 de noviembre de 2022 bajo la dirección de la doctora Sonia Castillo Ballén y presentó todos sus exámenes para obtener la candidatura doctoral. Ahora voy a presentar a la doctora Pilar Méndez, la directora de tesis de Óscar. Es doctora en educación del Centro de Estudios e Investigación para el Desarrollo Docente y profesora e investigadora del doctorado interinstitucional con énfasis en el énfasis de ELT Education. Los jurados de esta tesis son, la jurado internacional es la doctora Sara Ortega-Higgs, doctora en estudios hispánicos de la Universidad de Puerto Rico y en estudios de lenguas romances de la Université Estendal Grenoble III. Actualmente se desempeña como profesora asistente en la Facultad de Artes y Ciencias de Howard Centro de Idiomas y Culturas del Mundo de la Universidad de Samford, Estados Unidos. El jurado nacional es el doctor Julio César Torres-Rocha, doctor en Educación Título por la Universidad de Exeter, Reino Unido, magíster en Métodos de Investigación en Lingüística Aplicada ELT por la Universidad de Warwick, Reino Unido. Actualmente se desempeña como profesor e investigador de la Universidad Libre en Bogotá, Colombia. Nuestro jurado interno, el doctor Harold Castañeda, es doctor en Educación por la Universidad de Londres, magíster en Lingüística Aplicada por la Carthage College, Estados Unidos, y magíster en Lingüística Hispanoamericana por el Instituto Caro y Cuervo. Es miembro del Grupo de Investigación, Aprendizaje y Sociedad de la Información y del Grupo Intertexto. Actualmente se desempeña como profesor e investigador en el doctorado interinstitucional en educación, sede Universidad Distrital. Thank you so much to our examiners for contributing to this important task. Continuamos. Osquitar, tienes 40 minutos para hacer tu presentación. Cuando te falten 10, te lo haré saber. Entonces, the best of luck.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for being here and welcome to this story entitled The Co-Construction of School English Language Teachers' Critical Identities Through Narrative Positioning. As Dr. Carmen said, my name is Oscar Fernando Abella Peña, and my doctoral advisor is Dr. Pilar Méndez, and I would like to thank Dr. Julio Torres, Dr. Harold Castañeda, and Dr. Sara Ortega for their contributions to this research study. So this story started back when I was in primary school, and I had this wonderful and sweet teacher who believed in Maria Montessori's approach. So she made those days very happy to me, and I really enjoyed my primary school because I learned through experiencing the world. But then everything changed when I went to the high school, and I found my place in this vertical and traditional place where I was not allowed to express myself and where I felt as a depository of information. So I never fit there. And this piece of song by Good Charlotte entitled The Anthem somehow portrays the way I felt when I was in high school. Okay, so here it goes. I hope you like it. And it also portrays why I decided to drop out high school when I was in seventh grade and why I decided to take the ICFES test in order to validate my high school diploma. Okay, so here we go. In my high school, it felt more to me like a jail cell, a penitentiary. My time spent there, it only made me see that I don't ever wanna be like you. I don't wanna do the things you do. I never wanna hear the words you say. And I don't ever wanna be you. Don't wanna be just like you. Oh, what I'm saying is, this is the end. Throw your hands up, yo. Don't wanna be you. So then, well, as I didn't want to be as my high school teachers, I went to the university to become the school teacher I never had. I wanted to understand the school from the students' perspectives, and I wanted them to participate in discussions about social issues. I wanted them to express themselves. So that was my objective when I went to university. But then when I finished my career, I found myself working with other teachers and having tensions and conflicts with them because I consider myself disobedient because I resisted to normalize school structures and I wanted all the other teachers to be and act like me. As they were not like that, I used to have many conflicts with them. But then when I started this doctoral program, I started listening carefully to my colleagues, and then I found that they actually had critical stances. For example, they used to highlight how the Colombian context had an influence over what we do inside the classroom. They also complain about, not maybe not with these words, but they used to complain how we are perceived as technocrats rather than as transformative intellectuals. And all of these things appeared during informal conversations with them. For example, they also mentioned those tensions that are between the curriculum and or what the curriculum expects from us and what the realities we have to face inside the classrooms. They also complain about the overcrowded classrooms and the lack of institutional support for innovation and those heavy workloads we have that leave little room for critical reflection and collaboration. And they also complain about how the language learning was perceived as an economical tool rather than a means of fostering critical literacy. So then I found out that school English language teachers are not passive recipients of these constraints, but we negotiate our positioning through micro practices of resistance. So, for example, we only unofficially adapt the curriculum when, for example, we bring these discussions about social issues with our students. Maybe they are not directly connected to the ELT field, but we have the discussions with our students. Or for example, when we participate in union activities that are ways to express our criticalities. So in this sense, resistance is a process through which educators challenge systemic constraints, fostering opposition to external pressures and internal transformation of identities and pedagogical practices. So here resistance emerges from specific historical and cultural contexts, and they reflect the interplay of power, lived experiences, and evolving agency, embodying progressive and reactionary tendencies. So as school English language teachers, our resistance is both shaped by and directed against the institutional and socio-political conditions that frame our professional lives. So then I started wondering, so maybe the particularities of my history is what had a huge influence on the kind of critical teacher I will become and how I was going to express my criticalities. So I started thinking like as other teachers had different histories, well, the way they expressed their criticalities it was completely different. And I additionally, I found that in my school, in every single document, there is this objective of making students become critical students. But then I started wondering, so what about what we believe or how we perceive our own criticalities? So then I found that according to Yamada, criticality is linked to two distinct concepts within the realm of education. On one hand, we have critical thinking, which has to do with how students have to develop argumentative skills or critical thinking or to read critically. And on the other hand, we have critical pedagogy, which is the concept I married to throughout this study and has to do with those aspects of our cognition and conduct that aim at instigating the transformation of the systems. This critical pedagogy transcends the boundaries of the educational institutions and extends to the broader societal context. So then, after all this reflection, I found out that we are school English language teachers, which means that we have very particular ways to exercise our criticalities and to teach because we work under very specific conditions and maybe very vertical or throughout vertical relationships. So then I started searching for information, and I found that there is a lack of research that examines how school English language teachers incorporate political and critical dimensions into our practices and instructional materials. So then I conducted this profiling exercise, which consisted on text mining different research documents to find out what has been or what had been researched in relation to school English language teachers' critical identities. And I found three trends. The first trend has to do with how critical reflection is implemented as a methodological element to research about teachers' ways of understanding the critical elements of their practices. And the second one has to do with, or had to do with critical thinking perceived as a content that teachers must learn in order to teach their students to become critical students. And the third one, and maybe the most relevant for this study, is related to how EFL teachers embody their critical identities. So there was a gap, and the gap had to do with the fact that the concept of critical identity hadn't been studied, except for Ryoko Kubota, who worked on that concept. So the gap was this opportunity to explore critical identities as a distinct concept and understand how it is shaped by the narratives of school English language teachers, influencing our behaviors both within and outside the classroom. Within or inside the classroom means those things that are directly connected to the teaching of the English language, and outside the classroom to those things that maybe are not planned to be part of the ELT field, but that are ways that we embody our criticalities. So in order to understand critical identities, we have these two concepts. On one hand, we have criticalities, which are thoughts, proposals, actions, and positions that teachers incorporate into their practice to challenge the status quo. And that has to do with questioning dominant linguistic ideologies, resisting hegemonic curriculum mandates, and engaging students in discussions about social issues. And on the other hand, we have identities, which from a post-structural perspective are not fixed, emerge through continuous negotiation in social and professional contexts. So then we have critical identities as evolving structures that school English language teachers construct over the course of our lives through reflection on our profession. And these identities are characterized by awareness of the power dynamics at play between teaching and the broader societal, political, cultural, and economic elements of our context. They are shaped by interactions with fellow members of the educational community and remain open to transformation. So then these two research questions emerge. The first one, what insights do our narratives as school English language teachers reveal about the construction of our critical identities? And the second one, how do personal and professional experiences shape the unique characteristics of critical identities in school English language teachers in the Colombian public education system? So these were the research objectives. The first one, to co-construct understandings through collaborative narrative positioning of the diverse shapes, textures, and expressions that characterize the critical identities of 4 school English language teachers. I will be talking about them in a minute. And to explore how participants' professional trajectories and biographical narratives have contributed to the development of their critical stances, allowing for a contextualized interpretation of how critical identities are embodied. So throughout this presentation, you will see how these objectives were achieved. So then if I wanted to understand other teachers' critical identities, I needed to go back to them, even if I had tensions with them. So I invited many of these teachers, and 4 accepted the invitation. And I have to thank to these participants, because without them, this study wouldn't have been possible. And then we have Michael, who is a very reflexive teacher, and he mentioned how he was influenced by music. And there was this band called Halloween, who he loved, and there was this song that had a huge influence on the way he perceives life and his experiences. And the singer of this band is called Michael. So this participant was named after the singer. Then we have Maria. Maria is a very also reflexive teacher, and she's very active in the unions, teachers, activities. And she, she was named after Maria Betsabe Espinosa, who was a leader in a strike in Colombia. And she was one of the first leaders, or the first women leading a strike in Colombia. Then we have Matilde, a teacher with a rural background, and she mentioned that there was this poem by Rafael Pombo, in which there was this little girl called Matilde, and she mentioned that she loved this poem because it had she found a connection between the way she perceives teaching and this poem. And the little girl in this poem is called Matilde. And then we have Maya, a very creative teacher, teacher who incorporates arts in her teaching. And she mentioned that one of her earliest memories was a TV show called Maya B, that was aired back in the 80s. So we decided to name her after this main character. So this study was conducted through these 2 lenses. The first one, qualitative approach, because it centers on the participants, their social environments, and their interactions. And the critical social approach in education, which is grounded in critical theory, and it has to do with interrogating power structures, social disparities, and issues of social justice in educational settings, and advocates for an education that challenges hegemonic ideologies and promotes transformative learning experiences. So in terms of the methodological approach, this is called a narrative positioning, and is compounded by these 2 elements. The first one, narrative inquiry approach, which is a methodological framework for conducting in-depth narrative explorations of experiences. And then we have positioning, which has to do with how we perceive ourselves, our context, and others, considering the ways in which hegemonic discourses define our roles in terms of status, power, and authoritative knowledge. So then the narrative positioning is a communicative process through which individuals are situated within conversations as participants who are both objectively observable and subjectively coherent contributors to collectively create narratives. So the participants the participants' narratives were analyzed from these three positioning levels. The first one, which has to do with how the participants position themselves within their narratives. The second one, with how the participants position themselves in relation to the other participants while they were sharing their narratives. And the third level, which has to do with how the participants position themselves in relation to those dominant societal discourses, which gives a sense of what type of person they were or they claim to be. So we had 6 encounters, which were moments in which we share our narratives. They took place in comfortable places. For example, we met at some of the participants' houses. A couple of meetings were at the teacher's lunch, but it took place on a Saturday, so we had kind of different vibes. And they were very informal and relaxed conversations. We shared food. We openly discussed our tensions. We talked about our tensions, our worries, etc. But we didn't explicitly discuss about criticality because the idea was that it emerged as the narratives were going on. At this point, it is important to say that I was a participant during the encounters, which means that I wanted, first, I wanted to explore my own critical identity as an internal process and a reflection, but at the same time, I wanted to challenge the conventional role of the researcher. So I didn't want the participants to feel me like I was going to observe them and taking notes and judging, but I wanted them to see me as what I am, a school English language teacher sharing tensions and points of view. But after the encounters, I assumed the position of a researcher. So from that point on, I started like analyzing the data, but not including my own information there. And this has to do with the collaborative narrative inquiry, which involves conducting research with the teachers rather than on them. And these encounters were video recorded and they were uploaded to a very famous platform, and that provided the opportunity to the participants to watch the encounters and reflect on them. So in terms of the field tools, the main data collection instrument were the oral narratives of the participants, in which they share their life events and experiences that shaped their identities and revealed elements of their criticality through the analysis. And then the oral narratives were transcribed, and then, as Clandinin said, turned into field notes. That is the moment in which these narratives become in something that can be observable and analyzed. And well, here just to mention that the videos were just an aid to locate information within the encounters that maybe I missed during the encounters. So during these encounters, we didn't have predetermined questions, because the idea was that the participants commented, reacted, reflected, inquired, or responded as the conversations naturally progressed. But we were guided by 3 broad themes. The first one, the pathways that led us to become teachers. The second one, our experiences as students from preschool through college, and our current experiences, challenges, and concerns within our school environment. So here, arts were very important because, well, I decided to incorporate the implementation of arts because it has arts have had a very huge influence, not only in my personal life, but also in my professional life. But the study is not aligned with an arts-based research. Arts, in this case, as Clandine mentioned, serve only as triggers for telling stories and were not themselves part of the field text. So the arts, these artistic expressions were triggers, and some elements were analyzed, but not as an artistic production, but as the content that they had. So, for example, we set the atmosphere with music. So while we were narrating our experiences, our past experiences, we played music that somehow evoked those moments in our lives. We shared pieces of art that somehow had connections with our perspectives as teachers. For example, the poem that that Matilde shared with us, or the song that Michael shared with us. We created simple drawings that represented moments from our lives. So as the participants were narrating, they were showing these images, like giving support to their narratives. And even these artistic references helped us to choose meaningful pseudonyms for the participants, as I already explained in the case of Michael and Matilde. So these are some samples of the artistic productions by the participants. The first one, the one that is up there, is a beautiful and very poetic story created by Maria, in which she narrates how a group of old friends meet in a particular place, and this story reflects her reflections after he rewatched the videos. Same thing with the next piece, that is a theater script created by Maya, in which she put there her reflections about the encounters. And then we have these four. Well, I know that they don't look pretty good because yes, here you can see them. And those are the creations they had to give support to their narrative. So they were narrating and they were showing and sharing these images. So as I said, we had a total of 6 encounters. The first one and the second one had to do with how did we get here and how is it going. The third one, the fourth one, and the fifth one were entitled Drawing and Narrating Our Stories at School, in which they shared the drawings. And the last one, and which was the longest one, lasting almost 4 hours, was Speaking Our Minds in Relation to Us as Teachers, in which we freely and openly talked about everything in relation to our teaching. And this was the moment in which we share an artistic production to make connections with our perspectives as teachers. So after all those videos, the question was, now what? How was I going to face all that information? So the first thing I did was that I started navigating the participants' narratives. So what I did was that I started spotting events in their narratives that somehow had connections with critical pedagogy, or elements from critical pedagogy. For example, teachers as intellectuals, oppressor and oppressor dynamics, power relationships, questioning the status quo, among others. But these elements were not predetermined, but they were emerging as the events were emerging. So what I did was I made the connections between these pedagogical, critical pedagogic elements and the events. So this is how they started looking like, and this is a document I called Events Spotting Document, in which I categorize their narratives as personal academic events, work-related events, pedagogy and education events, family events, and identity events. And this categorization provided a structured framework for analyzing the diverse experiences shared by the participants. And these events were analyzed from a holistic perspective, which means that I didn't pay attention like to the words or the intonation or the ways they share their narratives, but I pay attention to the content of their narratives, to the events themselves. So this is how the field texts look like. So here we have in this first column how they were organized. They went through were organized chronologically as the participants before becoming teachers and present day teachers, and then thematically as students, as teachers, the participants as students, as teachers, and as individuals. And here where I integrated the artistic reflections into the film notes, but again, not as a piece of art, but as a content, as the content and the message they were sharing. And in the next column, the yellow column, we had the ways they positioned themselves as they were narrating or sharing their narratives. So level 1, level 2, and level 3, as students, as teachers, and as individuals, and in Maria's case, as syndicalists, because that was a very a powerful element in her narratives. So this is a sample of how Maya positioned herself as at a third level and as a teacher. Sorry, in the third, in the at the three levels and as a teacher. So, for example, within her narratives, she positioned herself as a creative and inclusive educator who integrates arts-based pedagogy to foster emotional and critical engagement among students. In relation to the other participants, she positioned herself as an innovative, as a teacher who implements innovative methodologies, in contrast to colleagues who adhere to more structured approaches, and a teacher who resists administrative pressures while balancing institutional demands. And in relation to those dominant discourses, she positioned herself as a teacher that views her creative approach as a means of enhancing language education, aligning principles of critical pedagogy and culturally relevant teaching, as she, during her classes, shared pieces of art to reflect with her students about social issues. So the events had some connections. For example, some events had connections in relation to plots, context, characters, themes. So these events were gave shape to stories, which were structured sequences of events. And at the same time, these stories gave birth to the histories, which were the broader life experiences of the participants. So these allow me to understand better and to organize better their narratives. So this is the way they look. I would like you to focus on the second or the story in the middle, which is the history is called Personal Growth and Critical Reflections. And this history is built by two stories: political transformations and transformations related to perceptions in education. This is one of Michael's history. And all these events included in this history had to do with how education was a transformative element in his life. And then I organize or reorganize the participant narratives in order to present in a different way their story. So what I did was that I retold the story, but based on their narratives, and created these fictionalized stories, but again, based on their narrative. So I would like to read this one for you. Maria's high school years were turbulent. Conflicts with classmates and teachers marked her journey. Yo salí de ese colegio, yo salí de Clemencia como con ese odio hacia la sociedad. Yet, these experiences only strengthened her determination. Un certificado de disciplina, por las peleas, por lo grosera, porque yo no me dejaba de nadie, porque yo peleaba con los profesores, me querían obligar. Explíquenos de otra manera. No, niña, es que usted tiene que aprender. A pivotal moment came when she read Lucho Obrero, a book about the lumpen proletariat, which deepened her understanding on social issues and kindled her interest in union activities. So then, what are the knowledges from this whole process? In relation to the first research question, it was possible to understand that critical identities are shaped by living experiences and contexts that involve tensions, power relationships, questioning, and opposing and resisting. So, for example, these events are some of the events that build Maria's critical identity. For example, early conflicts with authority and exposure to syndicalism, with this book Lucho Obrero, political awareness, engagement with inequality activism and reflective teaching, resistant to traditional practices, but at the same time, contradictions and tensions, because within her narratives, she said she's committed to transformation and justice, but she's constrained by institutional norms and personal biases. So critical identities are co-constructed, dialogic, and positional at the three levels I already mentioned. So they are not merely told, but they are co-built in relation or in interaction with other teachers. So their interactions is where we can see, yes, where we can see the shape of each critical identity. And this has to do with this. It was possible to understand that critical identities show distinct shapes and texture, and they are not a single profile. For example, Michael's critical identity can be seen as a spiral of transformation that moves from vertical positions to be more inclusive, and that has to do with the transformations he went through and how the education, his educational process helped him to have this transformation or to live this transformation. Maria's angular and resistant critical identity is shaped by union activism, as I have showed you some samples. Matilda's critical identity is layered and conflicted, and she struggles between tradition and reflection, because something she mentioned during the narratives is that she knows that she needs to change some of her practices, but she's still working the same way because she feels this vertical power structure that somehow mandates or makes her teach the way she is supposed to teach. And Maya's critical identity is fluid and creative, weaving resilience with care. So throughout her narratives, she was sharing how she had a difficult life, and but how education even helped her to find herself. So this reframes critical identities as an evolving landscape rather than a checklist of traits, which means that each teacher, based on their life experiences, shape different critical identities. It was also possible to understand that critical identities are embodied in practices, which mean that teachers implement English as a tool for ethical political action, and not only to teach or to develop in their students language skills. So we use ELT for critical reflection and to empower our students and to help them reflect about elements like social justice, pushing back against neoliberal and standardizing logics and colonial legacies in school ELT. However, there are some tensions and contradictions that are constitutive of critical identities. So there are some gaps between the discourse of the participants and the practice. For example, some of the participants mentioned that they value criticality, but somehow they reproduced centric of classes centered on grammar. But these are not defects. They are analytic window into how institutional constraints shape what can be enacted. And these tensions are insights about critical identities on the real school conditions. And this has to do with this. Critical identities, school English language teachers' critical identities are characterized by resistance, power, and silence. So they grow through layered pedagogical resistances, as I explained, inside and outside the classroom and in different ways. And teachers challenge oppressive structures. For example, when they decide to change what the curriculum says, and they decide just to go their way, that is an act of resistance. And outside the classroom, for example, these informal conversations in which we share our tensions in relation to what we have to do at school, those are moments of resistance. So they are both internal transformation and external action. So for example, Michael shared how once he had a problem with a principal and with a coordinator, and he ended up being moved to a different school for defying the principal. Maria's syndicalism is a clear way she resistance within her teaching practices, and Maya's creative pedagogy has to do with how she wants to challenge the traditional ELT practices, and Matilda's dialogues outside the ELT curriculum. I'm going to give you a sample of Matilda's case in a minute. So, however, there are moments of silence, which means that teachers sometimes decide not to express their criticalities, and then their critical identities remain silenced. And these moments reveal survival strategies within oppressive contexts, showing tensions between advocacy and obedience. So in relation to the second research question, well, the events, stories, and histories, as I explained, feed identity, and they shape how criticality is embodied, which means what we resist, how we resist, and with whom we resist. And then I would like to use this Matilda's sample of her irregular and layered critical identity. So as you know, as I mentioned, she has this rural background, and she was very influenced by driving context, which generated an identity that goes from a critique to reproduction. So, for example, she mentioned that during the pandemic era, she decided to reflect with her students about the socio-political and economical repercussions of the pandemic. But she didn't take that discussion to the ELT itself, because she didn't like created materials or develop materials or topics or conversations related to that. But that is her critical identity being out there in the classroom. But again, then she suffered this pressure of the saber test, so she went back to keep her traditional ELT practices, as she said. So finally, I would like to share this kind of poetic reflection I made, and it has to do with waters and water. So it says, education is a river shaped by history, personal experience, and social reality. The critical identities of teachers flow within and beyond the classroom, surfacing in every choice, deviation, and dialogue. English lessons, often framed as language instruction, become spaces of reflection and resistance. Though these moments sometimes remain as currents rather than systematic waves. To teach in Colombia is to navigate currents of inequality, violence, and instability. Teachers are not only transmitters of curriculum, but subjects shaped by it. Their struggles are humble origins echoing those of their students. Resistance often appears as quiet gestures, classroom decisions, silences, and adaptations, small acts that resist the erasure of teaching, reduced test scores, and outcomes. Inspiration also runs through these waters. Just as teachers were shaped by others before them, they seek to leave traces of transformation, even when constrained by inherited practices or examined habits. These are not acts of harm, but sediments awaiting the erosion of reflection and renewal. Teachers embody not only their methods, but also their histories and identities. Yet, the riverbed must change. Teacher education must move beyond theory to equip future educators with tools to enact social justice, equity, and empowerment in practice. This study does not claim to map all rivers, but to trace four unique currents. The question that remains is how criticality can flow into embodied pedagogy, not as an abstraction, but as a lived transformation. The answer, like a river's path, depends on terrain, depth, and current. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Where do I start?
Wherever you want.
Okay.
Now, we will have questions, suggestion, comments from our 3 examiners. It is customary here to give the floor first to our international examiner, Dr. Ortega-Higgs, and then followed by our national examiner, Dr. Julio Torres, and finally our faculty examiner, Dr. Harold Castañeda-Peña. The mechanics is as follows. You will have each 10 minutes to answer. If there is a doctor in the room, you can address the presenter. So now, Dr. Sara Ortega-Higgs, you have the floor, 10 minutes. I will let you know when you have, I will be timing.
Okay.
You have the floor. Ella te va a llamar.
Can everyone hear me?
Can you talk and see if we can listen to you?
Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? No?
Van a hacer,
Entonces,
van
que
a
te
hacer
llame.
una videollamada, van a hacerte una llamada por el WhatsApp, ¿vale?
Okay.
Sí. Va a llamar.
Pues,
Va a llamar.
intente. No sale.
Ya.
Profesora Sara, nos...
Yo sí la oigo.
Yo la escucho los escucho perfectamente, pero creo que ustedes no me oyen a mí.
Bajito, pero...
¿Me escuchan mejor ahora?
un poquito mejor. Si
Ok.
quiere puede ir comenzando mientras
Pero
intentamos
no,
arreglar
no,
aquí los...
Sara, te voy a pasar el teléfono de Oscar. Creo que el que tiene que escucharte es él, ¿cierto?
Ok.
Entonces,
Hola, ¿cómo le digo?
mientras tú vas hablando para los demás, pues Oscar que te escuche. A ver, qué cosa, ¿eh?
Ok, entonces llamo a Oscar, ¿no?
Sí. Déjame le aviso a Harold que le avise a Oscar.
¿Me escuchan ahora o todavía estamos escuchando?
Pero no puedo. O cierro, no puedo cerrar, ¿no?
Bueno,
¿Sí?
Es que ya lo tengo.
dame un momentico, le voy a avisar a Oscar que coja el teléfono.
Yo con mi teléfono. Ah, ok. No, ¿para qué? Me dice Pilar que con mi teléfono. Pero ahí está el de ella. Digo, el profe de Julio.
¿Sí? ¿Me escuchan?
Oscar, Oscar.
Sí, ¿me
Esperemos
escuchan?
a ver, no, esperemos a ver qué solucionan allá, pero vamos a ver. Ninguno coge el teléfono ahora, todos están angustiados tratando de solucionar y Oscar no me coge el teléfono.
Son cosas que pasan, no pasa nada.
Pero parece que el problema es allá, ¿cierto? Porque yo la escucho perfecto.
Osquitar, Sara te va a llamar, contéstale, porque el que tienes que escucharlo más que todo eres tú, ¿no? Entonces, contéstale. Sara, ahora sí, márcale a él.
¿Le marco a Oscar?
A Oscar directamente.
Ok, a ver. Oh, who are you? Ok. Entonces, otra cosa sería que Aaron le pase el teléfono a Oscar.
We are listening to you perfectly, okay? So if you want to start up.
Ah, que te están escuchando, ok.
Okay, and the people on the screen, could you please just like close your microphones, please? Now, Sara, if you want to start right now, thank you so much.
Yes. So good afternoon, everyone. It is a true honor for me to serve as an international examiner for this doctoral dissertation. And I wish to thank the DEI as well as my distinguished colleague, Dr. Méndez Rivera, for this invitation. And above all, I want to warmly congratulate you, Oscar, for reaching this milestone today. And we are celebrating with you the end of your research journey, but also looking forward of the new paths that it is opening for you. So my remarks are going to be scaffold in first, I want to highlight what I believe are valuable and important contributions of your work. Then I will make some remarks and suggestions like facing toward the future of your research. And finally, I will present my questions for you. So in terms of the main contributions of your dissertation, first, as a foreign reader, your work was revealing, compelling, and so beautiful for me, as it really showed the current working conditions and the collective experience of ELTs in Colombia. And for this reason, I believe that your dissertation makes several important contributions, not only to the field of ELT, but also education in general. So first, I want to address how you have exposed systemic conditions. So you highlighted competently the impact of colonization and linguistic imperialism and brought awareness to Colombia's education, broader systemic issues inherently tied to power dynamics. And I'm quoting your dissertation here, that often serve to reinforce the status quo and marginalize critical perspectives that undermine educators' agency, end of quote. So indeed, the lack of institutional support in fostering teacher agency and igniting the formation of school teachers' critical identity, as well as instrumental policies that prioritize performance over critical thinking, limits their resistance to micro practices like you exposed so well throughout your whole dissertation. Another achievement that I have to highlight about your dissertation is how you are repositioning school teachers. So you reveal how Colombian ELTs resist this neoliberal technocratic system by constructing themselves as transformative intellectuals. They foster critical thinking, their reflexivity and social engagement through language education, even within the recognized limitations of your study. I have particularly commending you because you opted for a balanced approach that avoided polarization, and you demonstrated that critical identity exists, but may adopt different forms, tones, or even practices. The third achievement of this dissertation is broadening scholarly voices. You have centered school teachers, researchers, and by doing this, you are incorporating voices that are traditionally marginalized, unheard, or even underrated in the field of ELT research. And finally, I loved how you bridged the local and the global. You connect global ELT practices with localized Colombian challenges. And by doing this, you are advancing the decolonization of the field and creating a fresh inward perspective grounded on lived experience. So for these reasons, I believe your dissertation makes a unique and original contribution, both conceptually but also methodologically. So now I would like to make a few remarks and suggestions about your work. And my first observation is the researcher positionality and rigor. So in my initial review, I did express my concerns about your high level of involvement in the study as a participant researcher, which is a position that challenges and distinguishes itself from a more positivist approach of a researcher observer. And I expressed my concerns about the potential for unconscious bias, for projecting your own theorizations, and also shaping the narratives through your own positioning. So that was one of my main concerns. You responded very well to my suggestions and my observations. And I commend you on the second manuscript of your dissertation that I read in the last weeks, and for the way you addressed those concerns. So by repositioning yourself as a participant researcher, not only you added nuance to your conclusion. For example, I'm thinking of the chapter 8 with Matilde's narrative, but you also demonstrated academic humility, rigor, and respect for the limits of the study. But at the same time, this reflexivity strengthens the credibility of your approach. And the last observation I have to make, and this is my final observation, and I'm thinking toward future research for you. So I want to comment briefly on style. Your dissertation was very foreign, different, challenging, but at the same time refreshing for a reader like me. Here in the US academia or European academia, we are trained to think, to read and write in a very conventional way. So page after page after page, you kept on challenging me constantly to think outside the box. And you demanded a lot for a reader, from a reader like me. But some of the rhetorical choices in your writing could be interpreted more as self-indulgent than substantial. A doctoral thesis is not only a personal journey, but also a contribution to a shared body of knowledge. That means that it requires precision, coherence, but above all things, accessibility. For example, replacing widely understood terms like findings with less conventional ones, or using metaphorical framings such as the terrain, the explorers, and the inhabitants can risk obscuring meaning. So while these choices reflect your commitment to highly valued and recognized decolonial theory, some readers may see them as distracting or even trivializing the seriousness of the research. So my bottom line here is the challenge is to find balance. Resisting academic molds is important, but a thesis and especially future publications must still be legible within broader academic conventions if they are to be recognized as rigorous contributions. So without this balance, the danger is that the study may be read as prioritizing stylistic rebellion over scholarly substance, which could unintentionally limit its reach and impact, and creates the risk that the study marginalizes itself. So ironically, you are replicating the silencing dynamics that you claim to resist. So looking ahead, I see your dissertation as a foundation for further exploration of teacher identity through collaborative and narrative approaches, turning research findings into forms of open activism for pedagogical change in Colombia, and contributing to international ELT scholarship by connecting decolonial perspectives from the Global South with global academic conversations. So to close, here are my questions for you today. The first one is, how have your peers' narratives transformed your own critical identity construction during this research journey? The second one, what did you learn about your own research capabilities and the process of inquiry for this project? And 3 and 4 are actually tied and they overlap. How might the results of your study evolve into open activism to influence pedagogy in Colombia? And finally, how do you envision positioning yourself as a scholar practitioner in the years ahead? And how will this thesis guide your next steps? Thank you. The last two ones?
Yes, please.
Yes. So how might the results of your study evolve into open activism to influence pedagogy in Colombia? And how do you envision positioning yourself as a scholar practitioner in the years ahead? And how will this thesis or dissertation guide your next steps?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Higgins. Now, Dr. Julio, you have the floor, 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, all you, for inviting me to read this thesis. Thank you, Oscar, for the honor to be able to go through your story, as you said. You have walked us through the different paths of your participants and their trajectories and their own experiences and beliefs, and even personal theories about the way they go about education, right? So it's been a very interesting and challenging reading as well, because of the way it's written in a non-conventional way and trying to explore a different rhetorical structure in your writing. And so I think I enjoy reading it at times, obviously, because it's demanding as well. You feel like it is a little bit reiterative, but that reiteration and redundancy has obviously an objective and particular target for the person that is reading the document. So it was an interesting document that also brought us interesting insights about how can you become critical within the constraints of a society and a system that has been designed probably for compliance rather than rebellion. No, so it's interesting to see all these reflections throughout the document and also through the participants' testimonies. I just want to to the ELT field. In what sense? Because obviously we can take a look at contributions from different sides. So you're gonna lead us to where you think is the best contribution to the ELT field. And in hindsight, I would like you to tell us if you could change now about your process, your methodology, the way you do your conversations with the participants to the study, what would you have done in a different way that might have improved or enhanced your research? That would be like request, 3 pieces of request in order for you to answer at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Torres. And now we invite our faculty examiner, Dr. Harold Castañeda-Peña.
La copia. Okay. Guys, can you hear me over there? Okay. So thank you so much, Oscar, for your presentation, your dissertation viva. I just want to celebrate, and before I give my opinion about your viva on its own, I want to celebrate this moment because I feel very proud of you. I'm very happy that you are just at this stage of the process in which you start discussing with the academic world the work that you have been doing over the last couple of years. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for the music, for the caricaturas, for the memes, the memes, and everything, because I think those are very constitutive of yourself as a critical individual and as a critical teacher. And I think that this might not resonate in specific academic spheres, but however, this is part of the rebellion, even though we are risking, as Dr. Ortega-Higgs said, to ostracize ourselves. But at the same time, we need to do that because otherwise we wouldn't be able to be listened to or speak at people in this way. So thank you so much for being so brave and for embracing such a mission, which is not only educational, but also academic. So now, mi copia. Okay. I need like a larger desk here. Okay. Okay. There was something in your dissertation that was very appealing to me. And you were talking about this huge construct that acknowledges that language teachers are indeed critical. And you were talking about critical identity. But in the text, you mentioned something about critical disobedience. And I thought that that was a very appealing, concept and understanding that could be constitutive also of critical identity. Of course, you didn't mention that over your presentation here today, but I was wondering if you could expand a little bit on what you understand by critical disobedience and how that, clicks with, critical identity. I think that will be very important because Dr. Torres asked you, please, in a nutshell, answer your research questions. Tell us what the answers are, right? So what I'm asking you is adding a little bit to that answer in terms of what are the elements that constitute a critical identity of anyone, and if we can over or not generalize them. Okay, good. Over your presentation, and thank you so much for taking so seriously the feedback and the comments that the examiners made, because I was looking at the comments that the other examiners also made, and I was like so also happy in the way you addressed them. But even though that in your viva, you address the fact that the critical identities have got certain textures and shapes, you kind of answered that towards the end of the presentation. I don't know, you could expand a little bit more on that. What are those textures and shapes of critical identities? And this is a question that I hope you can answer in the sense of understanding, like you have been asked about the contributions of your dissertation to the field. But I want to ask, what is the contribution of your dissertation to identity studies? Because, it's like identity has become such a common ground name and field. And, the meaning of identity has been like empty somehow, because we all know that the flux that they are, and so I don't know, you can answer a little bit that. I think that's what I wanted to ask. Yes, okay. So those are my questions, Osquita. Thank you so much again for your interesting work.
Thank you very much to our 3 examiners. And now, Oscar, I invite you to again to the stage. You have up to 30 minutes to provide your answers to the examiners.
Okay. Well, again, thank you for these questions because they, as you said, this is, I think, the beginning of research in relation to school English language teachers' critical identity. So these questions are gonna make are going to open the roads that now we have to go through. So I am going to start with Dr. Sara Ortega's questions. I hope I got the questions as they were because the audio was a little bit difficult. But you asked me about how this process transformed my own critical identity. So in relation to that, I think that the first thing that transformed was that now I am aware that this critical identity exists in me, and that there were some elements in it that somehow were the reasons why I had so many conflicts with other teachers, because my critical identity at moments and the shape it had was a very, I don't know, like spiky shape, because I wanted others to be like me. And that, instead of generating a climate in which other teachers felt free to speak with me, I was like building a wall, between them and myself. So that's the first thing that transformed my the second thing that transformed my critical identity, because now I know that in order to understand others and to talk about being critical implies listening to others. And that's something that was not part of my critical identity before this my doctoral studies, okay? The second one, you asked how my way of inquiring changed. Was it that, the second question?
Do you need to repeat the question?
I would love to.
Okay. So what did you learn about your own research capabilities and the process of inquiry?
Sorry, repeat my process of research. What? Sorry.
What did you learn about your own research capabilities and the process of inquiry through this project?
I think that I learned to observe certain elements in the education field from different perspectives, and not only from one specific perspective, but I learned to make connections, like historic connections, like human connections, because I feel like when as a school English language teacher, you are under all this pressure that tells you who you have to be and how you feel to understand your field. So your purpose, your objective is to teach students to learn the English language. But then throughout this study, I understood that this exercise of teaching English is not an isolated element, but that is connected in terms of history, and not only the history of Colombia, but the history of each teacher and the histories of the students. That has to do with something I would like to explore maybe later, and has to do with the students' critical identity, the school students' critical identities. But yeah, I think that I learned to understand and problematize elements from different perspectives. No? Okay. So the third question, had to do to how I position myself in relation to the results. Could you please read it again if I got it right? No.
Yeah, sorry, the sound was against us today.
Yeah.
So how might the results of your study evolve into open activism to influence pedagogy in Colombia?
Activism and activism in pedagogy in
Open
Colombia.
activism.
Open
How-
activism.
Uh-huh.
Well, I hope that when school English language teachers read this document, they understand something that actually is has to do with a reflection I made listening to the participants' narratives. It has to do with how sometimes they feel like the curriculum is above them and that they have to obey the curriculum. So I hope that by understanding that there is an opportunity to challenge this vertical power relationships, they start like finding ways to fight back the curriculum and understand that teachers are the ones who build the curriculum and not the other way around. And I feel that teachers go like, I would like to share a narrative, not with the exact words, but they were like, yes, I would like to do this, but we have to do this. And my question was, who told you? That is like you were a victim of the system, and then you become part of the system and become a victimizer within the system. So I hope that by reading this document, teachers understand that they have a power for transformation, and that it is not only by expressing themselves during teachers' strikes, but that there are other ways for this activism. Yes. Okay. And then you asked about how it was. With next step from this research study. I don't know. The thing is that I find that there are many things to do. For example, I would like to understand students' critical identities, because they are. I know that I'm going to be speaking from a vertical perspective of power relationships, but they are at the base of this structure. So I would like to give voice to them. I also would like to explore why we end up like, I have a notion of why we end up doing the same things that we complain about when we were students and now we do as teachers. But I think that narratives would provide a clearer idea of how that transformation between being students and then becoming teachers. I would like also to explore that. So, yeah. Thank you. So now I'd like to address Dr. Julio's questions. Yes. So the first one is to answer the questions in a nutshell. I will need to read the research questions, but I got them right here. So in relation to the first one, that is, what insights do our narratives as school English language teachers reveal about the construction of our critical identities? Well, it's all the knowledge that narratives provide in relation to those critical identities that somehow are quiet inside us. So it allowed me to understand how the identities are represented throughout those narratives. And of course, well, throughout the whole process, how the teachers position themselves along their narratives. But it was possible to understand that the events and the narratives give shape to the critical identities. Yes, that is like basically. And in relation to the second research question, that is, how do personal professional experiences? Well, I think that it has to do with how these critical events, but critical in terms of criticalities that we live, for example, as students, make us take like different positions in relation to who we are becoming as teachers. So, for example, I would like to mention Maria's narratives about her conflicts at school, yes, and the reading of Lucho Obrero, yes. So those events shaped this activism as a syndicalist, and which actually was the only teacher who had like a different discourse that related to syndicalism, and that was so powerful that gave shape to that identity, to that specific critical identity. So the events and the way we live these events are the ones that characterize our critical identities within this the Colombian public system. Okay. The second one, the contributions to the ELT. As far as I know, the critical identities haven't been explored within the ELT. Maybe some things have been told about them, but we haven't been able like to explore how different they are. And that would be like, I don't know, I think like it would be a way to feel free to be yourself as an English language teacher, because according to my experience at the university, I learned that I had to teach in the English language, but I never considered those critical elements and how to make them part of the teaching of the language. So I think that that is a contribution to understand that we have to allow ourselves to be and to express our criticalities inside the ELT, and start thinking, for example, in a curriculum that includes critical elements and discussions about political issues with students inside the classroom, and not as a thing that is away from the ELT, but that can be that there are connections that must be done. Yes. So the third question: how I change my relation with the participants, right? My relationship, Dr. Julio, you meant my relationship with the other participants? Why would I change from all the I don't know. Right now, I don't think so. Right now, in this moment, I don't think so, because when I finished writing the document and when I finished even reflections with the other teachers, I felt like I had accomplished what I planned to do. So no, nothing. And the fourth one, how to enhance my research. That was the question, yes? Okay, so that would be it. And then in relation to Dr. Harold's questions, the first one, critical disobedience, so what it is. So I think that within this study, I found myself as a disobedient, because I questioned everything, and well, not everything, but I started questioning, why do I have to do this, as you said? And not only questioning, but doing things like performing actions that go against what I don't know, what the coordinator or the principal says, is a way to be disobedient in my teaching practices. And I would say that, for example, playing a song here is a way to be disobedient. So I would, and as I shared with you, this definition has to do with not going against, but resisting these institutionalized practices that exist in schools. In relation to the second one, elements that constitute critical identities, the thing is that, as I said, we cannot say that critical identities are constituted exclusively by this or that. But I can talk about these for school English language teachers. And something that is constitutive of their critical identities had to do, for example, with including elements of social issues in their classes and allowing their students to talk about that, even if the class, I don't know, even if the materials, if there were not materials prepared for talking about that in class. That would be one particular thing among these four teachers. Or for example, well, there was one encounter in which one of the participants shared an image, a drawing of a very famous political person in Colombia, and all the participants reacted like to that character. So I would say that at least within these four participants, their critical identities are connected to more social elements in the politics, yes, and more, and they are concerned about, for example, free education, yes. So these elements are constitutive of critical identities, at least in Colombia and at least in public schools, because we will have, and that would be very interesting to have this kind of, to conduct this kind of research in a private school. I think that maybe the outcomes are going to be well, they must be different because there will be different participants. In relation to the third question, okay, expand on the textures and shapes. I think that it was like a way to, in a metaphor, explain how you feel when you talk to these teachers and their criticalities. I think that there is an expression, I don't know if it works in English, but in Spanish, we say, oh, that is a very soft person, or una persona muy suave, yes? So that is like you are not touching the way this person is, but you are feeling like that when that person talks to you. So when the participants talked about or expressed their criticalities, that's how they felt. For example, when I said that, when we talked about Maria, that is angular and resistant, is because when she talked about her participation in the teachers union, she was like that, you know, she was like angular like this, and nobody's gonna change my mind. So that's what I meant by the shapes and textures of the identities. And in terms of the contributions to the identity studies, again, I think that it's an opportunity to understand the identity of the school English language teacher, but from the perspective of their criticalities, yes, and how these two elements are crossed within their practice. So that would be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oscar, for your answers. Now we have 10 minutes available if there is a doctor in the room who wants to ask a comment, make a question. Yes. Sorry? Yeah, sure.
Pues voy a hablar como doctora, que se llama como hermana. Entonces, pensaba yo durante todo el proceso que, pues, de lejos se presenció, pero sobre todo acá en las presentaciones, diría yo en palabras de Batín, voy a traerlo, que en esa arquitectónica de identidades, más que una pregunta es una reflexión. Siento yo que en esa investigación en donde esa arquitectónica de identidades, cómo me identifico yo para mí y reconozco mi historia, cómo otros son para mí, hacen parte de formar esas identidades. Y cómo yo también, desde esa identidad que estoy formando, soy para nosotros. No solamente se le aporta al investigador, en este caso al programa, porque esas investigaciones pues enriquecen muchísimo el doctorado, sino que siento yo que esos sujetos mismos participantes son invitados a reflexionar, porque muchas veces no son conscientes de su rol como profesores, y no solamente como profesores, sino como profesores en la escuela, que son identidades bien distintas, ¿no? Entonces me parece que se dan muchos procesos muy bonitos de alteridad por esa metodología que se implementa al investigarlo. Y entender ese quehacer profesional es también invitarlos a ellos a pensarse como ser conscientes de su rol social dentro de la escuela. La pregunta más bien sería, o la invitación, a la importancia de desarrollar este tipo de investigaciones con esas identidades de los docentes que no son conscientes de ese rol o que tal vez no eran por vocación profesores, ¿sí? No han sido por vocación profesores. Y cómo ellos tal vez desde esa falta llamémoslo de autoconciencia de esa identidad, tienen que forjar a ser pues sujetos sociales en una escuela. Pues deberían empezar a reconocerse de alguna manera en esta metodología de dónde vengo, quién soy, cómo esos otros sujetos me han formado y cuál es la importancia de mi rol como profesor. Me parece que invita sobre todo es a eso, ¿no? Siento que Oscar tuvo la fortuna de contar con una población con una diversidad de experiencias que los llevaron a querer estar donde están, ¿sí? A la mayoría. Entonces me parecería interesante que eso también sirva como punto de partida para otras investigaciones en donde esos que no se hallan en ese espacio, en donde esas identidades tal vez están como fluctuantes. Era eso.
Muchas gracias. Tenemos otros minuticos y hay otro doctor que quiere hablar, doctor Figueroa, gracias.
The first thing I'll say was like disrupted. But I was thinking in your presentation how your personality impacts my research, and I believe your personality and your identity give us some freedom of the rest of us, you know, or renting ourselves because we said like these guys do this, I can do something similar, so it's beautiful. In the way you approach your participants, in the way you believe your ideas and you research and you question yourself. It's a beautiful path we recorrimos juntos. So I'm very proud of you, and it's an honor to know you.
Thank you very much. Osquita, would you like to add anything or?
Here?
Por favor.
I don't want to talk anymore. No, thank you very much for those words. I think that what Dr. Abella provides I think that is very interesting to discuss about that. Yes, because I think that was not a topic that emerged during our conversations. And as she said, all the teachers were like, I'm here because I wanted to be here. And thank you, Zaitas. I know that you have been a witness of how this proposal was built up, and I'm glad you're here to see not the results, but the knowledges.
And we usually have 10 minutes for the thesis advisor to give some words. So I will ask Pilar if she wants to talk right now or.
Yes, I can do it.
Would you like to do it now, Billy?
Yes, I would like.
I'm sorry. Es que es después.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay, so now we will have to step to. ¿Y se van a otro lugar? Bueno. So, Dr. Ortega-Higgs and Dr. Torres, Dr. Castañeda-Peña. Dr. Higgins, they are going to place a WhatsApp call with you for the deliberation, and the rest of us can stay here waiting for the
order to maintain a strong alignment across all the Oscar Research project dimensions. To my dear Harold Castañeda, thank you for your insightful suggestions on the articulation of Oscar's main arguments. Your questions today made me shake. So thank you for that. And to my dear CH, because we are a team of professors working together to help to our doctoral students to get the most of them. And also would like to extend my gratitude to the attendees of Oscar Viva today. I could see Dr. Abella and Dr. Sebastian among the attendees today, and so thank you for that support to Oscar. Oscar, your dissertation was a profound testament of your courage, dedication, and unwavering commitment to the field of the English language teaching and also education. I agree with her, with Sara in that particular comment. As a school English language teacher, you pursued academic excellence, but also you dare to challenge the norms of the system that often overlooks the nuanced realities of educators, of school teachers like yourself. In a work environment stressed by individualism and limited recognitions, you choose a different path, one of collaboration, empathy, and deep listening. Your decision to relate differently with your participants, honoring their stories and histories with care, rigors, speaks a lot of your integrity and passion. I would like to comment a little bit on my own impressions about your work. I think that your work stands for his rigorous and sensitive methodology. That methodology, collaborative narrative inquiry, and the narrative positioning created a space where voices could be heard, not just studied. Your use of narrative, oral narrative, artistic triggers, reflective dialogues, reflect a profound respect for your participants and a commitment to co-construct meaning. Also, the nuanced understanding of critical identities, rather than framing your research results in binary terms, to be or not to be critical. You explore the complex, evolving nature of critical identities. And somehow I agree with Dr. Abella that there are tensions, contradictions, and sometimes school English language teachers are so oppressed that they themselves cannot see the important role that they have in education in a broader sense. The transformative vision for ELT and for education in general, because you could show that even with little resistant practices that are unseen, are not a spot for the system, teachers are doing their best to educate children and to educate adolescents with a different scenario to overcome ignorance, to overcome poverty, to see in education a path. Nowadays, that education is under assault of neoliberal agendas and technocratic tools in which somehow teachers get involved perpetuating that type of behavior. But the 4 participants you invited to reflect on that particular issue could understand better that the role, even though they are small practices of resistance there or open resistances that are more rebellious or more disobedient or that are confronting, facing all the reality that the school is experiences, those participants were able to identify that education is still a journey and a very important journey for transformation. So thank you so much, Peter, for having chosen me as your advisor. This time I couldn't be with you as the time you were defending your undergraduate proposal, but thanks to, technology, I can be there with you, and you know that I really admire what you have done, and I'm sure you are becoming a great person, and you will do a lot of transformation in your school, and you will move, you know, an open terrain for other teachers to continue dreaming about doctoral education, to do research with purpose and with political purpose. So thank you for that.
Before reading the minutes for this Viva, I have two things to say. First, congratulations, Dr. Abella, and welcome to our academic community. And secondly, another doctor for the Abella family. So just for everyone to know, we are like working like with 3 Abella brothers, okay? So that's what. Okay. Okay, el jurado, muchas gracias a la doctora Sara Ortega, al doctor Julio César Torres, una felicitación a la directora Pilar Méndez y también a nuestra maestra de ceremonias Carmen Elena Guerrero por todo su trabajo y obviamente a Osquita. El jurado quedó absolutamente impresionado con el riguroso trabajo que realizas y que recupera niveles de detalle bastante complejos frente a lo identitario y la posicionalidad. Lectura del acta. Universidad Distrital Francisco José de Caldas, Doctorado Interinstitucional en Educación, Acta de Defensa de Tesis Doctoral, Acta T12-2025. El martes 2 de septiembre de 2025, la doctora Sara Ortega-Higgs, doctora en estudios hispánicos y doctora en estudios de lenguas romances y profesora asistente de la Universidad de Samford, en Samford, Estados Unidos, por videoconferencia. El doctor Julio César Torres-Rocha, doctor en Educación en Título, profesor e investigador de la Universidad Libre de Colombia, presencial. Y el doctor Castañeda-Peña, doctor en Educación, profesor e investigador del Doctorado Interinstitucional en Educación, sede Universidad Distrital Francisco José de Caldas, en modalidad presencial, se reunieron como panel evaluador de la tesis doctoral titulada The Co-Construction of School English Language Teachers' Critical Identities Through Narrative Positioning, de autoría de Óscar Fernando Abella Peña, dirigida por la doctora Pilar Méndez Rivera, profesora e investigadora del Doctorado Interinstitucional en Educación, sede Universidad Distrital Francisco José de Caldas. Luego de escuchar la defensa de la tesis doctoral en mención, el tribunal otorga la calificación de aprobada con distinción. Felicitaciones, Osquila.
Felicitaciones a nuestro nuevo doctor. Muchísimas gracias a todos los asistentes, muchísimas gracias a nuestro panel de expertos, doctora Ortega-Higgs, doctor Torres, doctor Castañeda-Peña. Muchísimas gracias y con esto damos por terminada esta defensa. Felicitaciones al nuevo doctor again y muchísimas gracias a todos. Feliz tarde.